The room was filled with the soft buzz of chatter and the occasional clatter of chairs as people settled in for the small school event. Everyone seemed relaxed, but the girl standing near the edge of the room felt her stomach twist with nerves. She had always loved music, the way a simple melody could carry her away, but being in front of people made her feel like a small bird caught in a storm. She had practiced on the old piano at home countless times, her fingers dancing across the keys with ease when no one was watching. But here, in front of all these eyes, it felt like every note might betray her. She looked around at the crowd, noticing the familiar faces of classmates who were talking in small groups. Some were whispering and pointing in her direction, clearly amused. A few of them even let out little snickers. The laughter wasn't cruel, but it was enough to make her cheeks burn. She tried to shrink into herself, wishing for the floor to open up and swallow her. The piano at the center of the room seemed so big and intimidating now, its polished wood shining under the soft lights, the keys gleaming like tiny pieces of ivory. She could almost see herself tripping over. Her heart beat fast, a rhythm that seemed louder than anything else. She could feel the sweat forming at the back of her neck, and she rubbed her hands against her dress, trying to calm herself. She thought about turning around and walking away, pretending she had forgotten her piece, but something inside her refused to give in. The music had always been a part of her, a safe place she could return to no matter what. She took a shaky breath and reminded herself that it wasn't about anyone else. It was about the sound, about the feeling of the piano under her fingers. The teacher on stage smiled warmly, noticing her hesitation. "It's your turn," they said softly, encouraging but not pushing. She nodded, feeling the weight of every eye in the room, and took a tentative step forward. Each step felt heavier than the last, as if the floor itself wanted to slow her down. She could hear whispers, tiny murmurs that made her stomach flutter. A few students whispered jokes, thinking it would be funny if she made a mistake. She wanted to cry, wanted to hide, but she forced her legs to keep moving. When she reached the piano, she placed her hands on the keys and froze for a moment. The wood was smooth and cool beneath her fingers, familiar yet strange in this public setting. She closed her eyes briefly, recalling all the times she had played alone at home, letting her fingers wander and make music without care. A memory flashed of her sitting by the window, sunlight streaming in, her fingers moving effortlessly over the keys, lost in the joy of sound. That memory gave her a small spark of courage. She opened her eyes and looked at the keys, deciding to trust herself. The first note was soft, almost hesitant, but it rang clear in the quiet room. She played slowly, carefully, her fingers finding their way across the piano with surprising steadiness. For a few seconds, no one laughed. No one whispered. There was only the music, carrying gently through the room. The sound seemed to fill the space between her and the audience, creating a little bubble where nothing else existed. She could feel her body relaxing a tiny bit, the tension in her shoulders loosening. But then a small giggle came from the back of the room, followed by a few whispers. Her confidence wavered, and she felt her hands tremble. She stopped for a heartbeat, unsure if she could continue. The laughter wasn't harsh, but it was enough to make her doubt herself. She looked up briefly and caught the eyes of a few classmates who were smirking, clearly expecting her to fail. Her heart sank. She wanted to run away, to give up, but the music inside her refused to be silenced. She took another deep breath and reminded herself that it didn't matter what anyone thought. The sound had to come first. She began again, this time letting her fingers move more freely. The notes flowed with a bit more confidence, though she still played cautiously. She remembered the lessons she had learned from her piano teacher. Every note had meaning, every pause had weight. She tried to imagine the story she wanted to tell through the music, letting it guide her hands instead of her fear. As she played, a few heads turned toward her with curiosity rather than amusement. The whispers slowed, replaced by a quiet attentiveness that she hadn't expected. Her fingers stumbled slightly on a tricky passage, and her heart leapt into her throat. She froze for a moment, but then she remembered something her teacher always said. Mistakes are just part of the music, they don't define it. She kept going, letting the melody carry her forward. The room seemed to shift around her. The chatter faded into the background, replaced by the steady, rhythmic flow of the piano. For a brief moment, she felt as if she were alone in the world, the music wrapping around her like a warm blanket. A few people in the audience leaned forward, intrigued by the unexpected skill in her playing. The laughter from earlier was replaced with quiet murmurs of surprise. Even some of the classmates who had snickered were watching her now with wide eyes. She noticed the change, and it gave her a small boost of confidence. She kept her focus on the music, letting the emotion behind each note guide her. She realized that this moment wasn't just about performing. It was about showing herself that she could face fear and still create something beautiful. The melody began to flow more smoothly, her hands moving with a grace she hadn't known she possessed in public. She felt the rhythm in her chest, a heartbeat that matched the pulse of the piano. Each note seemed to echo her determination, telling a story that words could not capture. She glanced at the audience, seeing their expressions shift from curiosity to admiration. The girl felt a strange sense of pride, a recognition that she was capable of more than she had allowed herself to believe. As she reached the end of the first part of her piece, she played a few gentle, lingering notes that seemed to hang in the air. The room was quiet, the tension replaced by a collective anticipation. She exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of the moment lift slightly from her shoulders. Her hands hovered above the keys for a heartbeat, and then she continued with renewed focus. The music carried her, each note stronger and more confident than the last. By now, the audience was completely absorbed. The whispers and giggles had disappeared, replaced by the sound of breathing, the subtle rustle of clothes, and the occasional gasp at a particularly beautiful note. The girl felt a thrill of energy flow through her, a sense of connection with everyone in the room. She realized that the laughter had not defeated her. It had only made her more determined to prove herself, not to them but to herself. Her confidence grew with every passing measure. She began to experiment slightly, adding delicate flourishes and little variations she had practiced at home. The music became her voice, expressing the emotions she had held inside for so long. She could feel the joy in creating something that resonated, something that drew the attention and respect of the people around her. The piano was no longer an intimidating object. It was a partner, a friend that helped her speak without words. By the time she finished the first part of the piece, she felt a mixture of relief and exhilaration. Her hands were steady, her breath even, and her heart was light. She looked up at the audience and saw expressions of surprise, admiration, and even a little awe. She had done more than play the piano. She had faced her fear, ignored the laughter, and let her talent shine through. It was a small victory, but for her it felt monumental. She stepped back from the piano for a moment, allowing herself to breathe and feel the accomplishment. The room seemed different now, filled with a sense of quiet respect. She had proven to herself that she could rise above doubt, that music had the power to transform fear into confidence. The girl smiled softly to herself, realizing that this was only the beginning. There were more notes to play, more stories to tell, and she was ready to continue, no matter who was watching. She took a small step back from the piano, feeling her heart still racing, but a new sense of determination had begun to grow inside her. The first few notes had broken the barrier of fear, and now she could feel the music calling her forward again. Her hands hovered above the keys, almost trembling, but this time with excitement rather than panic. She reminded herself that the room had gone silent, that people were no longer laughing or whispering. All eyes were on her, but the weight of judgment felt lighter somehow. Taking a deep breath, she allowed her fingers to settle on the keys. The first few notes of the next part of the piece were soft and deliberate. She had practiced this section hundreds of times, but now it felt different. The audience wasn't invisible anymore. They were part of the experience. Each note she played seemed to reach out to them, carrying a tiny piece of her courage with it. She could see some faces leaning forward, eyes wide and focused, watching her carefully. The laughter from earlier had faded completely, replaced by curiosity and quiet attention. She closed her eyes briefly, letting the rhythm guide her. Her fingers moved more freely now, finding the notes as if they had been waiting for her all along. She remembered the countless afternoons at home, playing in front of a window with sunlight streaming in, imagining someone listening and smiling at her music. That memory gave her strength. She opened her eyes and looked down at the keys, letting the melody flow naturally, without forcing it. As the music continued, the girl began to lose herself in the sound. Her nervousness melted away, replaced by a sense of purpose. She wasn't playing to prove anyone wrong anymore. She was playing to show the music in her heart. The room seemed to respond to her, the silence no longer oppressive but supportive. Every note felt alive, carrying emotion that words could never express. She could feel the connection between herself, the piano, and the people around her growing stronger with each measure. A few people in the audience exchanged glances, clearly surprised by the skill and emotion in her playing. They leaned forward in their seats, drawn in by the unexpected beauty of the performance. Even some of the students who had laughed before seemed captivated now, their expressions shifting from amusement to admiration. She noticed the change and felt a small spark of pride. The fear that had gripped her only moments ago was gone, replaced by a quiet confidence that came from trusting herself. The melody began to pick up, a gentle crescendo that made her pulse quicken with excitement. Her fingers danced over the keys, moving with a grace she hadn't felt in public before. She remembered her piano teacher's advice: to let each note tell a story, to feel the music as much as play it. She imagined each sound reaching into the hearts of the listeners, carrying emotion they could feel even if they couldn't see it. The thought filled her with determination, and she played with more expression, letting the music breathe and expand. Every so often, she glanced up at the audience, seeing their reactions change with every note. Some faces were wide-eyed in surprise, others were softly smiling, and a few even looked a little teary, touched by the beauty of the music. The girl felt a strange warmth in her chest, a sense of connection she hadn't expected. She realized that music could speak where words could not, that it could bridge the gap between fear and admiration. The audience's attention wasn't a weight anymore. It was a source of encouragement. The piece had a particularly tricky section, one she had struggled with countless times during practice. Her fingers hovered over the keys for a brief second, almost hesitating. But then she reminded herself of all the times she had mastered it at home. She let her memory guide her hands, and the notes fell into place perfectly. Relief and exhilaration washed over her as she continued, feeling more in control than ever. The audience seemed to notice the skill and precision, their quiet awe growing with each measure. She began to add subtle variations she had improvised during practice, small flourishes that made the music feel alive and personal. The piano became an extension of herself, a way to communicate her emotions without speaking. She could feel the energy of the room responding to her playing, the connection deepening with every note. The once intimidating instrument was now a friend, a partner that allowed her to express feelings she hadn't been able to put into words. A few moments of silence passed between phrases, and the girl used them to catch her breath and focus on the next section. Her hands had stopped trembling entirely, replaced by a steady confidence that made each note deliberate and meaningful. She could feel the music guiding her, helping her move past fear and doubt. The audience remained captivated, some leaning forward as if they didn't want to miss a single sound. The transformation from nervous child to confident musician was clear, not just to her but to everyone in the room. As she played, she remembered the advice of her family and teacher, that mistakes are part of music, that emotion matters more than perfection. She let go of the fear of making errors and focused entirely on expressing herself. The melody became richer, more dynamic, carrying highs and lows that reflected her journey from hesitation to courage. Each note was infused with feeling, a silent declaration that she was capable of more than anyone had expected. The audience's reactions grew more pronounced. Soft gasps escaped from a few people, small whispers of admiration filled the corners, and the teacher watching from the side nodded approvingly. Even the classmates who had laughed earlier seemed genuinely impressed, their faces showing surprise and respect. The girl felt a surge of pride and joy, realizing that her perseverance had turned the moment around completely. She wasn't just playing music. She was telling a story of courage, resilience, and self-belief. The room seemed to fade around her as she entered the final section of the part she had practiced. Her fingers moved quickly and confidently, executing the complex passages with ease. She felt a sense of exhilaration she had never experienced in front of an audience. The music carried her forward, a wave of sound that enveloped the room and drew everyone in. She noticed a few people holding their breath in anticipation, waiting for the next note, completely captivated by her skill. When she reached the climax of the piece, the notes resonated strongly, filling the room with energy and emotion. Her heart pounded with excitement and pride. She realized she had done something remarkable. She had faced her fear, ignored the laughter, and created something beautiful. The music was no longer just a performance. It was an expression of herself, a testament to her determination and love for the piano. The last few notes were softer, more delicate, lingering in the air as if reluctant to leave. She let them fade naturally, her hands resting gently on the keys. A brief silence followed, almost like the room was catching its breath. Then, slowly, she heard the first claps, quiet but genuine. One by one, more people joined in until the applause filled the room. The girl's cheeks flushed, and a small smile spread across her face. She had done it. She had transformed doubt into confidence, embarrassment into pride. As she stepped back from the piano, she felt a sense of accomplishment unlike anything she had experienced before. The audience was still clapping, some standing, some smiling with admiration. Even those who had laughed earlier looked surprised, some with a hint of regret, some simply in awe of her talent. She realized that fear had been a barrier only as long as she allowed it to be. Now it had been replaced with courage, and that courage had allowed her music to shine. Her heart still raced, but now with excitement and joy rather than anxiety. She had discovered something important, that trusting herself, even in the face of doubt, could lead to extraordinary moments. The music had become a bridge, connecting her to the audience in a way words never could. She knew that this was only one step in a longer journey, but it was a crucial one. The experience had changed her, teaching her the power of perseverance, the importance of self-belief, and the magic of music. She looked at the piano one last time before stepping away, feeling a sense of gratitude for the instrument that had given her a voice. She had learned that talent alone wasn't enough. Courage, determination, and trust in oneself were just as important. The applause still echoed in the room, a reminder that moments of bravery, even small ones, could create lasting impressions. The girl knew she would carry this lesson with her, not just in music but in every part of her life, ready to face future challenges with the same quiet strength she had discovered that day. The girl sat at the piano, feeling the vibrations of the last notes still humming in the room. Her confidence had grown, and now she felt ready to give herself completely to the music. She let her fingers hover above the keys for a moment, feeling the anticipation, the quiet expectation from the audience. The room had gone completely silent, the previous whispers and laughter replaced by eyes fixed intently on her. For the first time, she wasn't nervous. She was determined to show what she could do. She began the next section with a gentle, flowing melody. Her fingers moved gracefully, each note landing with clarity and emotion. The audience was drawn in immediately, sensing something special in the way she played. She could see the teacher watching closely, their smile approving but restrained, waiting for her to show the full depth of her talent. The girl felt a thrill run through her. She was not just playing notes. She was telling a story. The music grew stronger, more expressive, each chord building tension and emotion. Her fingers danced across the keys, confident and precise. She could feel the connection to the piano deepening, the instrument responding to her touch as if it knew her intent. The melody began to take on a life of its own, and with each passing moment, the girl became more immersed, losing track of time and forgetting entirely the eyes watching her. The audience began to shift in their seats, leaning forward to listen more closely. A few gasps escaped when she hit particularly difficult passages with ease, executing fast runs and delicate arpeggios that seemed almost effortless. People who had doubted her were now leaning in, captivated by the skill and emotion in her performance. Even the students who had laughed before looked shocked, their faces wide with surprise and admiration. She reached a dramatic part of the piece, one she had practiced countless times but never imagined she could play with such expression in public. Her hands flew over the keys, precise but full of feeling. The notes rang out clearly, resonant and powerful, filling every corner of the room. The audience held its breath, completely absorbed by the music. The girl felt a surge of exhilaration. This was the moment she had been waiting for, the moment where her preparation and courage collided to create something truly remarkable. Her fingers moved faster now, playing passages that demanded both speed and delicacy. Each note seemed to sparkle, carrying the emotion she felt inside. She imagined telling a story through her music, and the audience seemed to follow every twist and turn. She could feel their energy feeding her own, giving her courage and drive. The laughter from earlier felt like a distant memory, replaced by focus, awe, and respect. A sudden rush of adrenaline pushed her further. She began improvising slightly, adding small flourishes she hadn't even planned. The audience noticed, leaning forward, captivated by the unexpected brilliance of her playing. Each note was intentional, yet alive with spontaneity. The girl felt a sense of freedom, realizing that music wasn't just about playing the right notes, but about expressing herself and connecting with others. She had become a storyteller, and the piano was her voice. The room seemed to shrink around her. Every person in the audience felt drawn into the world she was creating with sound. She could see some faces touched, some surprised, some smiling with admiration. Even those who had doubted her were now captivated, their earlier judgment replaced with appreciation and awe. The girl felt proud, not because she had proved anyone wrong, but because she was expressing her heart and soul through music. Her hands moved with fluidity, playing a series of cascading notes that seemed to float in the air. The melody twisted and turned, rising and falling in perfect harmony. The audience was silent, completely absorbed. She could feel the tension and anticipation in the room, the quiet awe that comes when someone witnesses something truly beautiful and unexpected. It was a feeling that made her pulse race with joy. For a moment, she paused, letting a single note linger, resonating through the room. The sound hung in the air, and the audience seemed to hold their breath. It was a delicate, fragile moment, but it was also full of power. She felt the emotion coursing through her, translating into every key she touched. Then, with confidence, she continued, building the piece to an even more thrilling section, her fingers flying with precision and grace. The music became faster, more dynamic, full of passion and energy. She played with such intensity that the audience could not look away. Each note was sharp and clear, yet filled with feeling, telling a story of struggle, determination, and triumph. The girl's heart beat in time with the rhythm, and she could feel the connection to the audience deepening with every measure. They were no longer mere spectators. They were part of the experience. As she reached the climax of the piece, her fingers moved almost effortlessly, the complex passages executed flawlessly. The energy in the room was electric. People leaned forward in their seats, some gasping in awe, some whispering softly to each other in amazement. The girl felt a thrill of pride and excitement. She had entered a world where music and emotion intertwined, and she was leading the way. She slowed down slightly, preparing for the ending. The final notes were softer, yet each carried weight and meaning. Her hands moved gently, allowing the sound to linger, to echo in the quiet room. The audience remained silent, captivated by the beauty and skill they had just witnessed. The girl felt a mixture of relief and exhilaration. She had faced her fear, overcome doubt, and now shared something truly astonishing. As the last note faded, there was a brief silence. The room seemed to hold its breath for a moment, as if unsure how to respond. Then, slowly, the first claps began, quiet but sincere. One by one, more people joined in until the applause filled the room. The girl felt a rush of happiness and pride. She had not just played the piano. She had amazed the audience with her skill, her courage, and her expression. She stood up from the piano, her hands still tingling from the energy of the performance. The audience continued clapping, some even standing, their expressions full of admiration and respect. Even the students who had laughed earlier looked surprised, their faces showing a mixture of awe and realization. The girl smiled softly, feeling a warmth in her chest. She had not only conquered her fear but had also created a moment of beauty that everyone present would remember. The teacher approached, clapping warmly. "That was incredible," they said, their eyes shining with pride. "You played with such emotion and skill. Everyone could see how much heart you put into it." The girl nodded, feeling a mix of humility and pride. She had done it for herself, but the recognition felt wonderful. She realized that the music had been her voice, expressing emotions she could never have put into words. As she walked away from the piano, she felt the weight of the room's energy shift. The laughter and whispers from before were gone, replaced with admiration and respect. The girl understood that this was more than just a performance. It was a moment of transformation. She had stepped into a place of courage, expressed herself fully, and connected with others in a way she had never imagined possible. Sitting down in the audience later, she could still feel the thrill of the music, the way it had moved her and everyone else in the room. She realized that this experience would stay with her forever, a reminder that bravery and passion could overcome doubt and fear. The girl smiled to herself, knowing that the piano would always be her way to express her heart, and that nothing could take away the feeling of astonishing everyone with the beauty of her music. The moment the girl finished playing, the room seemed to hold its breath for a heartbeat before applause filled the space. It started softly, a few hands clapping hesitantly, and then grew louder and louder as the audience realized what they had just witnessed. The sound was overwhelming, not in a frightening way, but in a way that made her chest swell with pride and joy. She had gone from being the nervous girl laughed at for touching the piano to someone who had completely captured the attention and admiration of everyone present. She stepped back, her hands still tingling from the final notes, and allowed herself to look around. Faces that had been filled with doubt and amusement were now wide-eyed and smiling. Some people were whispering to one another, clearly sharing their surprise at how talented she was. Even the students who had snickered earlier looked stunned, their expressions a mix of shock and respect. It was a strange feeling, seeing the world turn on its head in a matter of minutes, all because she had trusted herself and the music she loved. The teacher came over first, clapping enthusiastically and beaming. "That was incredible," they said warmly. "Your courage and skill were amazing. You really captured the heart of the piece." The girl nodded, still feeling the adrenaline coursing through her veins. It was hard to put her feelings into words, but she knew she had done something special. The applause continued, some people rising to their feet, cheering and whistling softly. It was more than she had ever imagined possible that a few students approached her hesitantly, their earlier laughter replaced by admiration. "I didn't know you could play like that," one said softly, almost in awe. Another added, "That was amazing. You completely surprised us." She smiled, a little embarrassed but also proud. She realized that the moment had changed the way people saw her. The laughter that had once embarrassed her was gone, replaced by genuine appreciation. The realization filled her with a warm glow, a sense of accomplishment that went far beyond simply playing the piano. The girl's family, who had been sitting quietly at the back, looked on with pride. Her parents' eyes shone with emotion, and they exchanged glances filled with admiration. They had always known she was talented, but seeing her perform in front of an audience and completely astonish them was a moment of pure joy. It was a reminder that perseverance, practice, and courage could create unforgettable experiences. The girl felt grateful for their support, realizing how important it had been in giving her the confidence to play despite her fears. Even the principal, who had been watching from the side, stepped forward. "That was extraordinary," they said, clapping along with the audience. "Not only did you play beautifully, but you showed incredible courage and poise. You should be very proud of yourself." The girl felt a lump in her throat, a mixture of happiness, pride, and relief. She had faced her fear, performed with her heart, and left a lasting impression. The recognition from adults and peers alike made the moment feel even more real and meaningful. As the applause began to die down, people started talking among themselves, sharing their amazement and excitement. Some were still whispering about how unexpectedly talented she was, while others were laughing softly, no longer at her, but in awe of what she had accomplished. The energy in the room had completely shifted. Where there had once been laughter and doubt, there was now admiration and respect. It was a powerful transformation, one that the girl would remember for the rest of her life. The girl felt a sense of relief wash over her. The fear she had felt earlier seemed distant now, almost like a shadow that had been chased away by the light of her performance. She realized that the courage she had mustered to play despite the laughter had been the key to this moment. The experience had taught her something valuable, that facing fear, even when it feels impossible, can lead to moments of profound accomplishment and recognition. Some of the audience members approached her to compliment her directly. One teacher said, "You have an incredible gift, and you just proved that courage can turn doubt into admiration." A student added, "I've never seen anyone play like that before. It was like the music came alive." The girl nodded, her heart full of gratitude. It was a moment of validation, not just of her talent, but of her ability to trust herself and her instincts. The recognition felt like a warm embrace, reassuring her that she had made the right choice to step forward and perform. She noticed a few of the students who had been the loudest in their laughter earlier looking slightly embarrassed. Some avoided her gaze, while others offered quiet compliments. She felt no anger or resentment toward them. Instead, she felt compassion and understanding. Everyone has moments of doubt or judgment, and what mattered most was how she had responded. She had transformed a potentially humiliating experience into an opportunity to shine. It was a lesson she would carry with her. Kindness and self-belief often speak louder than criticism. The teacher approached again, asking if she would like to perform another piece. The girl hesitated briefly, then smiled, feeling a surge of confidence. She realized that the stage and the audience no longer seemed intimidating. Instead, they were opportunities to express herself and share her passion. The idea of performing again, once terrifying, now felt exciting. The music had become a bridge between her and the world, a way to communicate without words and leave a lasting impression on those who listened. She took a few moments to collect herself, adjusting her posture and letting her fingers rest. The audience continued to watch with anticipation, some leaning forward, eager to hear more. The girl felt a mixture of excitement and calm. She understood that the power of the music lay not only in technical skill but in the courage to express oneself fully. That understanding gave her a new sense of purpose and direction. She knew that this moment would mark the beginning of something bigger, a realization of her potential and her love for music. The applause gradually faded, replaced by a quiet hum of admiration and discussion. The girl took a deep breath and let herself feel the impact of her performance. She had astonished everyone. Yes, but more importantly, she had astonished herself. The experience was transformative, showing her that courage, preparation, and trust in her own abilities could create magic. She smiled, feeling the warmth of pride and satisfaction, knowing that this was a moment she would carry with her forever. People began to approach her more openly, some asking questions about her training, others sharing how much they had been moved by her playing. The girl responded with humility and gratitude, realizing that her music had reached them in a way words never could. The connection she felt with the audience was profound, a silent understanding that art and emotion could bring people together. It was a lesson in empathy and expression, and she cherished it deeply. As she walked away from the piano, the applause still echoing in her ears, she felt a sense of completion and satisfaction. She had faced her fears, performed with courage, and left a lasting impression on everyone present. The room seemed lighter now, filled with admiration and respect rather than judgment and laughter. The girl knew that this moment would remain a guiding memory, a reminder of the power of persistence, courage, and the ability to astonish not only others but oneself. Her family met her with hugs and proud smiles, sharing in her triumph. Her parents whispered words of encouragement, telling her how proud they were of her bravery and skill. The girl felt a deep sense of gratitude, understanding that their support had been crucial in helping her find the courage to perform. She realized that the experience had not only changed the way others saw her, but had also strengthened her own self-belief and love for music. The audience gradually began to disperse, but the impact of her performance lingered. Conversations continued about how talented and courageous she had been, and the story of the shy girl who astonished everyone with her piano playing would be remembered long after the event ended. The girl walked through the room, feeling the warmth and admiration of those around her. She knew that her music had touched people, and that realization filled her with joy and purpose. As she left the stage area, she took one last look at the piano, feeling a sense of connection and gratitude. The instrument had given her a voice, a way to express herself, and a platform to astonish others. She understood that music was more than notes on a page. It was a language of emotion and courage. The experience had taught her that true expression required facing fear, trusting oneself, and embracing the opportunity to shine. With that understanding, she felt ready to continue her journey, confident that her music would always speak for her, leaving a lasting impression on everyone who listened. After the applause had faded and the audience slowly began to leave, the girl felt a calm she had never known before. Her hands still tingled from the energy of playing, and her heart felt full in a way that went beyond excitement or pride. She had faced her fear, played the piano in front of everyone, and astonished them. But more importantly, she had astonished herself. That realization made her chest swell with warmth and a quiet confidence that she knew would stay with her forever. As she walked out of the hall, she could still hear the murmurs of admiration from the audience. People were talking about her performance, sharing how incredible it had been, how they had never expected such talent and courage from someone so quiet. She realized that her music had touched them in a way words never could. It had built a bridge between herself and everyone who had listened, a connection that was invisible yet undeniable. She smiled softly, knowing she had discovered a power within herself that was far greater than she had imagined. At home, she reflected on what had happened. The nervousness, the laughter, and the embarrassment all seemed like distant memories. What remained was a sense of achievement and a deep love for what she had done. She remembered the moments before she played, the hesitation and the fear, and she marveled at how far she had come in just a few minutes. It was a lesson she would never forget, that courage is not the absence of fear, but the choice to act despite it. In the days that followed, the story of her performance spread throughout her school and community. People who had been there continued to talk about the shy girl who had amazed everyone with her piano playing. Some teachers praised her openly, noting her skill, determination, and bravery. Her classmates who had once laughed at her now looked at her with respect and admiration. She felt a quiet satisfaction knowing that she had changed not only their perceptions of her but also the way she saw herself. Her confidence grew in ways she had never expected. She began practicing more seriously, exploring new pieces of music and pushing herself to try techniques she had once thought too difficult. The piano was no longer just an instrument. It had become a friend and a companion that allowed her to express her feelings and thoughts in a way words could not. She found joy in the music itself, in the sound of the notes, in the rhythm and melody that she could create. It was a world she could enter whenever she wanted, a world where she was free to be herself. The experience also changed how she interacted with others. She found herself more willing to take risks, to speak up, and to try new things. The memory of stepping up to the piano, facing laughter, and astonishing everyone gave her a quiet courage that she carried into other parts of her life. She realized that fear could be transformed into energy, doubt could become determination, and hesitation could turn into action. Every time she encountered a challenge, she thought back to that day and drew strength from it. Her family was proud, and they encouraged her to continue exploring her talent. They listened to her practice, offering support and gentle guidance, and they celebrated each new piece she learned with genuine joy. The girl felt grateful for their love and encouragement, knowing it had played a part in giving her the courage to perform. She also felt proud of herself for taking that first step, for daring to play even when she was afraid. The combination of support, practice, and courage had created something remarkable. As time went on, she began to perform in other small events, each time building on the confidence she had gained. The initial fear never completely disappeared, but it no longer held power over her. She learned to channel it into focus and energy, letting it guide her rather than hinder her. Each performance became a little easier, a little more natural, and the audience's admiration continued to grow. She realized that true courage is developed through repeated action, and each time she played, she became stronger and more assured. She also noticed how her story inspired others. Friends who had once doubted themselves came to her for advice and encouragement. Teachers who had witnessed her growth used her example to show students the power of determination and courage. She understood that by facing her fear and expressing herself fully, she had become an example for others. Her experience was no longer just about her. It was about showing what was possible when one believed in themselves and acted despite doubt. Music became a central part of her life. She explored different styles and genres, learning to play new pieces with skill and emotion. The piano became a means of expression and reflection, a way to share her feelings without having to explain them. She found that music could communicate what words could not, that it could touch people's hearts, and that it could create moments of connection that lasted far beyond the final note. Every time she played, she remembered the day she had astonished everyone, and she drew strength and inspiration from it. Years later, the memory of that day remained vivid. She could still recall the nervousness, the laughter, the moment her fingers touched the keys, and the astonishment on the faces of the audience. It had been a turning point, a moment that defined her relationship with music and with herself. She understood now that courage, self-belief, and persistence could transform fear into opportunity, hesitation into accomplishment, and doubt into admiration. It was a lesson that stayed with her, shaping the way she approached challenges in all areas of her life. The experience also taught her humility. While she had been celebrated for her skill and bravery, she knew that true accomplishment comes from dedication, practice, and a willingness to face fear. She never allowed herself to become arrogant or complacent. Instead, she continued to work hard, striving to improve and to express herself through music in ever more meaningful ways. She learned to appreciate the journey, not just the applause, and to find joy in every moment of growth and discovery. Over time, she began to perform in larger events and competitions, each time carrying the lessons of that first performance with her. The confidence and courage she had gained allowed her to face new challenges, to try new techniques, and to explore new aspects of her talent. She became known not only for her skill but also for the emotion and heart she brought to her music. People admired her not just for what she could play, but for the courage, determination, and passion that shone through every note. Looking back, she realized that the day she had been laughed at for touching the piano had been one of the most important in her life. It had taught her that fear is temporary, that courage can be cultivated, and that talent alone is not enough without the confidence to share it. The memory of the astonishment she had caused remained a source of pride, inspiration, and motivation. It reminded her that small moments of bravery can create lasting change, not only in how others see us but in how we see ourselves. The girl continued to grow, both as a musician and as a person. She carried the lessons of that day into her everyday life, facing challenges with resilience, expressing herself with confidence, and inspiring others through her actions. Music remained her passion, her refuge, and her voice. Every time she sat at the piano, she remembered the journey from fear to courage, from doubt to astonishment, and she smiled, knowing that she had discovered something extraordinary about herself. In the end, the girl who had once been laughed at for touching the piano had transformed not just the way others saw her, but the way she saw herself. She had learned the power of courage, practice, and self-belief. She had discovered that even in moments of doubt, one could create beauty and leave a lasting impression. The experience remained a guiding light, a reminder that determination and bravery can turn fear into triumph and astonishment. and that the music of the heart is always worth sharing with the world.